Tonight, a last-minute deal, now an uneasy peace. Russia narrowly avoids its own mercenaries invading Moscow. Australians dodge the polls over the Prime Minister's housing policy, despite claims rent caps won't work. A Padstow home burnt to the ground just a day after it was raided by police. A bad start to a tough week for former MP Daryl Maguire. More charges as the ICAC report looms. A new approach to road safety, the government giving your demerit points back. And the Bunnies go from bad to worse without Latrell Mitchell.
Live from Sydney, 7 News with Mark Ferguson.
Good evening. There's a nervous stalemate holding across Russia tonight, with an influential military leader in exile after what looked like a coup attempt on the Kremlin was called off at the last minute. Paid mercenaries who were meant to be fighting for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine marched into Russia and within 200 kilometres of Moscow before turning back. Only an 11th hour deal with their leader avoided a brutal conflict. But the political blow has left the Russian president looking weak in the face of an uprising of his own making.
In Russia's port city of Rostov-on-Don, celebrations. After being overrun and occupied, the private, mercenary Wagner army were now packing up and heading out. It was over as quickly as it had begun, less than 24 hours, but the ramifications will likely rewrite Russia's history. The man at the centre of it all, Yevgeny Prigozhin, also on the move, exiled to neighbouring Belarus after shaking the foundations of the Putin presidency.
This is an enormous shock to Russian politics, an enormous shock to President Putin's regime.
Prigozhin, a long-time critic of Russian defence leaders, had blamed them for a lethal attack on one of his bases on Friday. He instantly launched 25,000 troops, tanks, armour in rapid deployment for Moscow. The Russians started digging up roads to slow the convoy and even blew up its own fuel depots to stop them refuelling. Wagner forces seen in counterattack here, a missile narrowly missing this Russian helicopter. It sparked panic and chaos for civilians in Rostov. Railway stations packed with people trying to flee. Within hours, Prigozhin had taken control of the town.
It's 7:30. Rostov's military sites are under the control of Wagner fighters.
Prigozhin's troops had moved with lightning speed from the Ukraine front line into Russia, straight through Rostov and north, reaching just 200 kilometres from Moscow's centre. But then the sudden order to stop.
We're turning back our columns and returning to our field camps.
A peace reportedly broken by the Belarusian president.
It's the most dramatic military political confrontation in Russia in the last 30 years.
So, who is Yevgeny Prigozhin? A gangster, war criminal and billionaire. A one-time teen criminal who served 9 years on theft offences, got out and started a hot dog business, which he grew into a chain of restaurants that made him a fortune. He won the Kremlin's catering contract, earned the nickname of Putin's chef. But over time, he learned to cater to the president's other needs. He started a secret private army, the Wagner Group, in Ukraine in 2014 and quickly gained a fearsome reputation for brutality. Expanding to Syria and Africa, where they were paid in gold and blood diamonds.
Often illegal and definitely grubby.
Wagner's total force size, 50,000 worldwide, and up to 80% of them have been recruited from prison. He also took to cyber warfare on the US presidential elections. But his move on Russia's president will be all but impossible to come back from. Putin has cleared him of charges, but experts say he will not forgive or forget.
If you're Yevgeny Prigozhin, you need to get a new food taster and watch your back.
And Chris Reason joins me now. Chris, what does this coup attempt mean for Russia's war in Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine, Mark, is possibly the only beneficiary in this short-lived rebellion. Russia has had to move its military focus from the front lines to the home front, while the Wagner army is now leaderless and uncertain of its future. In short, it is a mess. great for Ukraine. But the bigger question now, though, is Putin's future. This may not have threatened his life, but his political life is now in jeopardy, and it throws nuclear-armed Russia into the worst domestic turmoil it has faced in decades. Putin's decision to invade Ukraine last year, Mark, really has spectacularly backfired.
It sure has. Chris Reason, thank you. Let's go to our US correspondent Tim Lester in Washington DC now. Tim, this military action had world leaders on edge for some time.
Mark, certainly here in Washington they've known about it for a while. Apparently US intelligence picked up the first signs of the rebellion almost 2 weeks ago. They briefed the White House behind me, but also the State Department, the Pentagon and senior figures in the US Congress. So all of them, including President Biden, wouldn't have been surprised as they watched the events of the last couple of days unfold. They were deeply worried, though, the President in particular, by the thought that he might face a situation where he didn't know who was in charge of Russia's nuclear arsenal. That hasn't come to pass this time, but Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, significantly weakened by the events of the last few days. US intelligence likely now is out trying to find where the Russian leader's next threat is coming from. Mark.
OK, Tim Lester with the latest from Washington. After days of speculation, the Prime Minister has finally ruled out dissolving Parliament over its housing policy. The battle with the Greens rages on, the government now standing firm on rental action, claiming it won't solve the housing crisis.
The standoff over rising rents.
This doesn't work.
Actually, rent caps do work.
The Greens want the federal government to force the states to take action on rental increases in exchange for support on the housing fund.
If we do not get rental inflation under control, then the Reserve Bank will keep putting interest rates up.
Some of the states and territories have ruled it out completely, both freezes and caps.
The ACT, though, has enacted a form of rental caps and it's kept increases below 1%.
While the rest of Australia has copped 10 or 20% rent increases,
forcing the minister to concede.
In some cases, it does work in a little way.
The Prime Minister says the Greens are just playing political games.
This isn't a campaign opportunity. This should be a policy solution.
But after signalling this week in Parliament that the constant deferral of the housing legislation could trigger a double dissolution election, the Prime Minister today ruled that out.
I firmly believe that government should serve their full term. That's my starting position.
One political leader might not get his full term, with reports the Nationals will call another leadership spill. The Sunday Telegraph suggesting members are dissatisfied with the performance of David Littleproud, with Barnaby Joyce and Keith Pitt biding their time. Mr Littleproud today laughed it off.
Look, a couple of bruised egos. It's the quest of the party room, and I've never taken anything for granted.
Knowing all leaders are on borrowed time. Jennifer Beshwati, 7 News.
A day after being raided by police, a home in Padstow Heights has been destroyed by fire, triggering a new investigation. Detectives returned to the scene today with an accelerant detector dog, trying to work out what happened.
Firefighters met with a wall of flames. As they grow stronger inside this family home, a new danger emerged for neighbours.
Yeah, we got told to evacuate. Just breathing in the smoke's kind of dangerous.
There was a couple of explosions and then the house was on fire.
Luckily, no one was inside the Padstow Heights property as it burned. But the owner did try to get back in, overwhelmed by the realisation that the flames were quickly ripping through his home. That is now mostly destroyed.
The two houses on either side received some damage because of the fire intensity.
The whole street came out and had a look, and I think so did Bankstown Police.
And they were back again today, collecting evidence. A fire accelerant dog also brought in. Police are now trying to work out if and how this fire could have been deliberately lit. But what we do know is that heavily armed tactical officers were seen at the home the day before it went up in flames.
I saw some detectives going in and then some, I think they were the tactical response officers coming out.
Items were seized from the home during the raid. No charges have been laid. Amy Clements, 7 News.
It's been a bad start to the week for former MP Daryl Maguire, with revelations of new charges just days before the corruption watchdog releases its long-awaited findings into his conduct as an MP. Let's go live to Chris Marr now. Chris, what more can you tell us?
Mark, former Wagga MP Daryl Maguire has been charged with conspiracy to commit an offence, but court files have shown a second charge has been lodged against Mr Maguire earlier this month, that of false and misleading evidence at a public inquiry. Mr Maguire has been charged with conspiracy in relation to allegations over a cash for visa scheme operated while he was a Member of Parliament. Now, it comes with the expected release of the ICAC report into the Operation Keppel, the conduct of Mr Maguire, but also widened to include former Premier Gladys Berejiklian. That was after the inquiry was widened when it was revealed of a close-standing personal relationship between Mr Maguire and Gladys Berejiklian. Of course, the former Premier throughout has denied any wrongdoing. Mark?
OK, Chris Marr with the latest. Thank you. A man accused of assault, kidnapping and leading police on a dangerous chase in the Hunter Valley is fighting dozens of charges against him. Kurt Field fronted Newcastle local court today, charged with 28 offences and was refused bail. The 37-year-old was arrested on Friday following a 3-month manhunt. His lawyer claims he's homeless and suffering complex mental health issues. He'll return to court tomorrow. Families are preparing to farewell the victims of the deadly Hunter Valley bus crash, with funerals being held across the country from tomorrow. The Warrandyte community in Victoria, which was hit hard by the tragedy, is holding a rally tonight to raise funds for those affected.
I think it's been actually really overwhelming to know that people care so much that they would raise funds for us and for those who have been affected. We know it'll be a long recovery for them.
Relatives have been waiting weeks to bury their loved ones as investigators struggle to identify many of the victims. It's been revealed that an Australian was among those injured in the explosion that rocked Paris last week. Peter Carman is director of the Paris American Academy, a fashion and design school based in the building where the blast occurred. The 76-year-old is in intensive care in a local hospital, suffering burns to 85% of his body. He's among the most seriously injured. The cause of the explosion is still unknown, though several witnesses reported a strong smell of gas. In a dramatic switch from punishment to reward, drivers are being offered an incentive to do the right thing on the road. The Premier announcing a plan to remove 1 demerit point from your licence, provided you stick to the rules for a year.
The Premier, this morning, was already winning over drivers with a different approach to the old way of slowing them down.
The stick. No one has ever tried the carrot.
Fast-tracking an election promise for driver demerit rewards.
If you do the right thing, you'll get that point back, and we want to incentivise good drivers in New South Wales.
If you have demerit points on your licence and you've not been fined between January 17 this year and next, 1 point will be taken off your total.
Nearly 6 months earlier than we'd originally expected.
The trial costing $5.6 million, affecting 1.7 million drivers who currently have demerit points.
Lost a few points from speeding, you can get them back a bit early.
One slight misdemeanour, it shouldn't soil your record for 3 years.
Doesn't worry me, I never speed. Haven't lost a demerit point in 50 years.
Road safety campaigners are unimpressed, especially in the wake of warning signs returning for mobile speed cameras.
Everything we've seen this government do is to make it easier for people to get away with speeding.
We'd seen record fines over the last couple of years, and still we saw the road toll rising. So it's the right time to try something new.
It's just 1 point, but it might make the difference between a driver having a licence or not. And speaking of speed, the government's planning to act quickly
to get the demerits law change through Parliament this week before it goes on a break. Chris Marr, 7 News.
A man on the Northern Beaches has escaped with nothing but a severely bruised ego after managing to flip his car in Dee Why overnight. Police and paramedics were called to May Road to find a blue Mazda on its roof and 2 other cars damaged. A man in his 20s managed to climb out of his overturned car, the other drivers also uninjured. It's every skier's worst nightmare, spending more time in a line than on the mountain. This video has been going viral over the weekend with lengthy queues at Australia's biggest ski resort, Perisher. The wait for lifts at the Front Valley, the main access to the resort, stretched over 100 metres with lines barely moving. There was no traffic on the Harbour Bridge this morning. Instead, one of our most iconic landmarks was transformed into an arrival lounge. Football fans from around the globe gathered, counting down the days until the Women's World Cup kicks off.
The Festival of Football has begun. As the sun rose across the city, the Sydney Harbour Bridge shut down. Traffic diverted as thousands of superfans descended for a celebration like no other. The 9th Women's FIFA World Cup is just 25 days away, with football fanatics flying in from afar.
We're not here to take part, we're definitely going to take over. Thank you very much, Australia, to open the door for all the countries.
I'm Uruguayan and I'm very happy to be here today.
All 32 countries represented on this year's Unity jersey. 17 metres of memorabilia marched across the coat hanger as drums and dancers brought the bridge to life.
No matter where you're from, what language you speak, you can come together, play the game and enjoy it.
Very proud and we want to celebrate.
Every pioneering player would have dreamed of the World Cup. The public adoration around a women's football team, it's just phenomenal.
18,000 people will be attending the very first game here in Sydney with 2 billion people watching worldwide.
The Matildas kick things off at Stadium Australia on July 20 before the tournament travels to Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth and Adelaide, all culminating in the World Cup final back in Sydney 1 month later. 1 million tickets have already been sold, but even if you miss out, you can still catch all the action from home. Every Matildas game and all the finals will be broadcast live and free on 7 and 7+. Lucy McLeod, 7 News.
Time for the weather details now. Amber, a frosty start for parts of Sydney.
Good evening, Mark. Yes, particularly across the southwest this morning, where we saw a return to sub-zero temperatures. It dipped to -1 just before 7 a.m. at Camden. Daytime temperatures have hovered around 20 to 22 degrees, though in strong westerlies it often felt several degrees cooler than this. Near gale gusts were recorded across some parts of Sydney today, reaching 67 kilometres per hour across the mountains. But damaging winds are set to continue strengthening this evening over the Great Dividing Range, so multiple warnings are in place tonight for the Blue Mountains and the Illawarra, extending to Sydney's enclosed waters and the Sydney coast tomorrow. We'll have more details in your full forecast. That's coming up later, Mark.
OK, see you then, Amber. Stamping out fake news on the internet, and Australia is leading the way. After the break, the hefty fines that could cost tech giants billions. Out of control, a car in the path of oncoming traffic on a major Hunter highway. Police officers charged with murder recorded by their own cameras. Later, world-leading technology developed here but unwanted by the government. And the fishermen snagged by a shark and lucky to be alive. Welcome back. Dashcam footage has emerged showing a close call for drivers on the New England Highway near Newcastle. On the right of screen, the driver of the sedan speeds around another car, clipping a gutter and spinning across the road out of control. He finished in a ditch, fortunately uninjured. Police haven't ruled out charges. The federal government is cracking down on fake news with new legislation to target tech giants. Digital platforms, including social media and search engines, could face fines of more than $6 million if they spread false information.
They're the lies, deception, interference spread online, now recognised as a clear and present danger to Australia.
In terms of its scale, it can be almost impossible to rein in when it takes hold.
The government revealing its planned crackdown on the spread of false information, such as
5G communications being somehow linked to the pandemic.
Holding search engines and social media to account for what they carry.
The regulator is able to look under the hood of what the platforms are doing and what measures they are taking to ensure compliance.
If not, the Communications and Media Authority would have the power to enforce tougher rules. The maximum penalty for breaching them would be $6.88 million or 5% of their global turnover. For Twitter, that'd be more than $200 million. For Facebook's owner Meta, it could be more than $8 billion. The government says the authority won't be checking individual pieces of content and won't have the power to tell outlets to take anything down. It also won't affect any authorised government and election material or professional news.
Even if it's unfashionable, even if it's not popular, even if it's a bit untidy at times, freedom of speech is fundamental and it's got to be protected.
Experts say it needs to make a difference.
Really target the black and white cases as opposed to those more nuanced, borderline grey area cases.
The proposed legislation now open for public comment. Paul Kadak, 7 News.
3 San Antonio police officers have been charged with murder after they allegedly shot and killed a woman inside her apartment. A warning: these pictures may cause distress. The suspect, accused of destroying property, locked herself inside before threatening police with a hammer. The police chief says it's likely the victim was in the grips of a mental health crisis, accusing the officers of using unreasonable, deadly force. A bridge collapse in the US state of Montana has sent a freight train plunging into a flooded river, spilling hazardous materials into the water. The train carriages were carrying hot asphalt and molten sulphur, forcing an emergency shutdown of drinking water intakes downstream. No one was injured. The cause of the collapse is still under investigation. A Florida fisherman's lucky to be alive after being dragged overboard by a shark.
Get him, get him, get him, get him!
He was washing his hands when the shark struck, then pulled to safety and flown to a nearby hospital. Fortunately, he only suffered a hand injury. A punishment never seen before after a series of shocking crimes. Up next, the chilling actions that led to a 50-year AVO. Game-changing treatments for chronic pain, how you can get involved. What can't she do? The Princess of Wales serves it up to the King of Wimbledon. Now that's a coffee, the expat Aussie showing England how it's done.
And ahead in sport, Ivan Cleary's solution to a big Origin problem: ban players from backing up.
Welcome back. A record apprehended violence order has been handed to a vile predator who won't leave his young victims alone. After finding ways to contact them, even from prison, Timothy Stewart has been ordered to stay away for half a century or risk even more jail time.
Even the cop reading it out to Rachel thought it must be a mistake.
He looked at the result and read it out as though he couldn't quite believe his eyes either.
I have to be honest with you, I have never seen an AVO of 50 years.
But there it was. You must follow these orders until 7th of June 2073. Timothy Stewart raped Rachel's daughters for years, then victimised her family for many more as he found creative ways to tie them up in the justice system.
9.5 years of dealing with him, interfering with our lives, filing appeals, making contact through family.
The record apprehended violence order was instructed after the predator was able to send a letter from prison to his young victim's home. She has provided no evidence that she suffered psychologically, he wrote.
He has absolutely no remorse. He has no comprehension of how his crimes have affected my children and myself. And
would you say he's enjoyed the journey?
I would. I've seen him in action in court.
We've seen Timothy Stewart in action in court too. Throughout victim evidence, he smirked once as if reliving fond memories, and he also sacked his solicitors so he could directly cross-examine his victims himself.
The Court of Criminal Appeals previously found a very strong suspicion that Stewart was playing the system to upset Rachel, and now with a half-century AVO,
you can now shut the hell up.
Timothy Stewart is serving a 32-year sentence. The AVO expires when he turns 102. Robert Avadia, 7 News.
Sparks were flying on the Gold Coast last night after an electrical box burst into flames. Firefighters arrived to the Queensland home around 11 o'clock as the blaze jumped a nearby fence. Crews scrambled to restore power to almost 40 homes after underground cables were damaged. The Aussie takeover of London's coffee scene is reaching new heights, with Lamingtons and Flat Whites now being served in a British cultural institution. It's part of a charge led by a former Sydney banker whose business empire is rapidly expanding.
She doesn't make so many coffees these days, but Prue Freeman still knows what it takes.
Everything looks calm, but everyone's running at a million miles an hour underneath. And I think that's what Aussies do really well, is we try to not overcomplicate situation.
Fed up with London's bad coffee 11 years ago, Prue traded her London corporate job for a van. That spawned into 14 locations across the British capital under the Daisy Green banner, including Bondi Green, combining edgy art with smashed avo and a decent dose of caffeine.
The coffee was a total change, actually, and I think that it took a number of years from people going from, really big, strong coffee down into, Flat White now being, so well known and so well loved in London.
Enough for the esteemed National Portrait Gallery to notice. After a 3-year renovation, it's reopened with a new resident, Audrey Green, a tribute to Audrey Hepburn, who began her career in this building, with a few Aussie treats thrown in too.
We're certainly doing our best to get them to enjoy them, and so far so good.
It's not just about the Aussie coffee and the cafe. Deep in the gallery's old coal vaults, this is Larry's, a new cocktail bar for the West End, a tribute to Laurence Olivier, with a touch of Australia too. Dame Edna joining other West End legends just around the corner from Leicester Square.
Having an independent business being in such an institution like this, and an Aussie one, is, it's really exciting, and it's quite amazing to be a part of it.
Showing the Brits how it's done. In London, Hugh Whitfeld, 7 News.
The Princess of Wales continues to show her sporty side, from rugby to racing, now tennis, alongside 20-time Grand Slam winner Roger Federer at the All England Club. Kate more than held her own against the man who made Wimbledon his own personal playground. But when it came to playing ball girl...
Good catch.
Are you allowed to do that?
Oh yeah, are you allowed to do that? That's good
In
point.
Australia they would catch it, but here in Wimbledon they don't.
It was all part of a short film shining a light on the training and dedication of Wimbledon's ball boys and girls. World-leading technology developed here, future-proofing the environment. Up next, why our brightest minds are being forced overseas. The real fear of missing out. Experts find the key to unlocking screen addiction.
Soon in sport, Craig Bellamy meets Sir Bob Geldof, the strange league issue that left the rock legend perplexed.
Welcome back. A Sydney Spring Racing Carnival is going international. The George Main Stakes will now be replaced by a $5 million King Charles III Stakes. Organisers hoping members of the royal family will head to the harbour city for the first running later this year.
It'll certainly be an amazing Everest Spring Carnival, which I sincerely hope you'll all have the opportunity to experience and enjoy.
The prize money for the Everest is also increasing to $20 million, making it the second richest race in the world. Homegrown technology to recycle plastics is set to benefit Europe before it's used here, with an innovative company setting up shop over there because of our restrictive policies. Advocates say Australian governments are falling behind when it comes to sustainable packaging.
An Australian breakthrough to stop soft plastic going to the tip is being picked up overseas.
It's using water under high pressure and temperature to convert plastic back into oil to then make new food-grade recycled plastic content.
The company successfully trialled its technology to continually recycle Kit Kat wrappers, but its first commercial plant will open in the UK this year, not here, partly thanks to the tax there on plastic packaging. Recycling advocates say Australia is falling behind.
We have to make sure that there are some good incentives to buy it back. Because don't forget, Australia is not a cheap country to manufacture in, and we need to drive those incentives.
And that's part of the reason that the Red Cycle program collapsed, because we don't have the end markets in Australia to take that soft plastic and use it as a new commodity.
Licella has $12 million of federal funding towards its first Australian plant in Melbourne. Construction at the Altona site is yet to begin.
A waste management survey found 36% of Australians would recycle more if they had proof their items were being recycled, and a third admitted incorrectly placing their soft plastics in the recycling bin.
Australia recycles only 12% of the plastic it produces each year. Emma O'Sullivan, 7 News.
A new Headspace survey has found a fear of missing out is contributing to the toxic social media habits for young Australians. More than half of young people have tried and failed to stay offline, despite 44% agreeing the content they see is mostly negative. Almost a third say they feel pressure to use platforms like TikTok, with many finding it easier to express their opinions online.
Obviously, we can understand the tension between wanting to disconnect but also wanting to be part of the conversation.
Expert advice is to mute accounts that make you feel worse. Australians dealing with chronic pain 24 hours a day now have relief in sight. Not just one treatment, but two. And there is a call for more people to get involved. Don't miss that story soon on 7 News. But now Mel is here with sport, and Mel, some much needed good news for the Sea Eagles.
That's right, Fergo. It is season over for Tom Trbojevic, but brothers Jake and Ben are ready to return. All your league news is up next, including life without Latrell continues to test the Bunnies. Cameron Murray reported in an upset loss to the Cowboys. And Talia McGrath swings the pendulum back Australia's way in a gripping women's Ashes test. Welcome back. Cameron Murray's on report, and Souths have now slid from 1st to 7th after today's big defeat to North Queensland. Brisbane suffered a loss to the Titans. Kevin Walters fears will scare off Ben Hunt, while the Cowboys added Souths to wins over the Storm and the Panthers.
Life without Latrell goes on against Origin-weary Cowboys. Not much to see in the first half. A dummy half derby for Robson and Cook. A head injury assessment for Cameron Murray. Passed. Only one try, but brilliantly done.
Taulagi with the catch. He reaches out and finally...
The unusual halftime score, 5-0. Reggie sensed trouble as Scott Drinkwater tore the Bunnies apart in the second half.
He finds Valentine Holmes. He's always a good option.
A double to Holmes, another young Cowboys forward unleashed.
Spine Fuiaki pouring through a hole.
Yeehaw, they've won 3 in a row. Murray was reported, frustration and headaches all round. A 31-6 hiding for Souths, who were title favourites only weeks ago. No Tino, still an array of stars running off Origin hangovers in the South East Queensland derby. A 6-all first half between the Broncos and Titans. David Fifita in beast mode again.
Fifita gets the ball away.
Sack the coach, win next game, work for Gold Coast. The Broncos had 3 tries denied in the second half, but might have Ben Hunt back from the Dragons next week.
Do you think he'd want to come to this club after watching that? I wouldn't have thought so. It's in the hands of the NRL.
Relief for Queensland. Fifita wasn't hurt and Pat Carrigan not penalised for this tackle. Matt Carmichael, 7 News.
Well, Tom's year is over, but a double turbo boost looms for Manly. Jake and Ben set to return against the Roosters next weekend. The Panthers rested their Origin stars and still defeated the Knights, while the Sea Eagles copped a 24-6 hiding from the Storm in Melbourne.
Rubbing shoulders with rock royalty, Sir Bob Geldof, an honorary stormtrooper for one night only.
He's in there, he's asking me a lot of questions about the scrums. Why isn't scrums a contest in your game?
There's no real answer to that. At least they get forwards out of the way so backs can earn their money. The Maroons flyer bagged a double. 20-year-old Jonah Pezzett, a more than capable replacement for the ill Cameron Munster.
Yeah, he was saying out there, Munster who?
You're sitting up in the box with a mask on, I don't know. He's going out to rob a bank or something, I'm not quite sure. But
it's a uniquely Queensland ailment.
It was an illness I've never heard of before, actually, so
Caxtonitis, I think.
The 10 or 12 schoons he might have had down at Caxton after the game might have added to it too. So.
With Tom Trebojevic's injury hangover destined to linger, there was one positive for Manly, Ruben Garrick at fullback.
Outstanding, so I think, Ruben will sort of have that number one going forward for the rest of the season. And
without Nathan Cleary and 5 rested Blues, the Panthers were still too strong and slick for the Knights. Ivan Cleary wonders whether the Origin backup should be a thing of the past.
There's got to be at some point a little bit of a consideration around whether backing up from Origin is an outdated kind of philosophy or a concept.
With 2 wins from their last 9, what happened to Justin Holbrook on the Gold Coast should have Adam O'Brien nervous.
Yeah, it's funny. If there was an easy fix, I certainly would have fixed it.
Nick Markham, 7 News.
It is a big game for James Tedesco and the Roosters, finishing round 17 against the Raiders at home tonight. An early penalty goal gave Canberra a 2-0 lead, but big Josh Papali'i has gone down with a leg injury and limped out of the game. Shades of Origin 1 for Tedesco. Jack Whiten leapt over the Roosters captain to take a bomb and score a brilliant opening try. Desperate for a win, the Swans rewrote the record books in last night's crushing win over West Coast at the SCG. The 205 is the AFL's highest score in 12 years, the club's second highest ever, and the 171-point margin is the equal biggest in Swans history.
Had a tough time for quite a while. From go to away, it was really good quality team football. It was a high quality game.
Sure was. The win came just in time for next week's crucial grand final rematch against Geelong, with both teams pushing for final spots. Well, the Swifts experienced the full cruelty of sport last night, leading for almost the entirety of their major semi-final with the Thunderbirds. Adelaide drew level on the final buzzer. With 5 minutes of extra time, the Swifts couldn't hold on, losing 64-62, giving up a direct spot in the Super Netball Grand Final.
To be honest, it felt like we let that one slip. I was really proud of our efforts today. I thought we almost had it, and then, just that last quarter we let it slip.
The Swifts host the Fever next week for the other spot in the decider. Well, an idea borrowed from the Swans led to Eddie Jones naming Michael Hooper and James Slipper as Wallabies co-captains for 2023. Hooper's already led Australia to a record 68 tests and returns from his mental health sabbatical. The Wallabies start the Rugby Championship in South Africa on Saturday, July 8th. Australia and England are proving why 5-day women's test matches are long overdue. With 208, Tammy Beaumont became the first Englishwoman to make a test double century, but with 7 wickets between them, Talia McGrath and Ash Gardner cut the hosts 10 runs short of Australia's 473 on a riveting third day. Trent Bridge.
I would certainly say that there's probably going to be a result, and that's what we're going to be pushing for.
Phoebe Litchfield's 41 not out. Australia are none for 82 and leading by 92 runs at stumps, well placed to dictate terms. If his injured knee recovers in time, Nick Kyrgios will begin Wimbledon, having played only 1 game all year after pulling out at the final warm-up event in Mallorca. Alex de Minaur's preparation has been flawless, however, beating world number 6 Holger Rune at Queen's to set up a final with Carlos Alcaraz.
Today, I reckon, was my best match so far, so happy days. We keep on going. 1 to go.
De Minaur will rise to a career-high ranking of 14 if he wins. And we'll finish tonight with a golden triumph very close to our hearts here at 7 News. Round 3 of the BMX World Cup in Papendal, Netherlands, and victory to Australia's Saya Sakakibara. Since the heartbreaking crash at the Tokyo Olympics, Saya's had an awful struggle with concussions. Her third came at this same track last year and almost forced her retirement before turning just 23.
I think just dealing with all those emotions, aside from the stresses of racing, was just really a lot.
To top it off, Saya's boyfriend, French Olympian Romain Mathieu, won the men's race. Virgo, it is an immense result for Saya. We love the Sakakibara family, and so congratulations.
Yeah, a lot of class and a lot of courage.
Yes, that's right, for all of them.
Thanks.
Well done.
A rare condition known as complex regional pain syndrome leaves many sufferers struggling to find any relief. But a new Australian trial, the largest of its kind, is investigating 2 possible treatments for the chronic condition, with researchers now looking for more people to take part.
In 2021, Brianna Anthony was getting ready for her best friend's wedding when her toe was impaled by part of an electric toothbrush. The pain was excruciating, even days later.
He sent me for every scan under the sun. I had ultrasounds, MRIs. When everything got ruled out, he said, I think you might have CRPS.
Complex regional pain syndrome, a rare chronic pain condition.
But I'm in pain 24/7. It can feel like stabbing, my leg's being crushed, or there's sunburn on my leg.
There's no cure and for some, nothing that can offer long-term relief. But new data from Neuroscience Research Australia has identified 2 encouraging treatments.
One of them is a medication, which is normally used across different neurological conditions.
The other
is a type of rehabilitation called graded motor imagery.
Now being tested as part of a groundbreaking trial conducted entirely via telehealth. More than 1,000 people are already taking part.
So we're going to open an arm of the trial in the UK.
Alongside the participants in the UK, researchers are still looking for people here in Australia to take part in the trial, with the results to be published in around 2 years.
Well, the more people that we can get, the quicker we can get, then we can know whether or not these treatments are effective.
Amber Laidler, 7 News.
And Amber is back now with the weather details. Amber, how's the working week shaping up?
Mark, aside from a few light showers midweek, it is looking mostly fine, though we do have some wind warnings in place tomorrow. Coming up next, your full forecast for the week ahead.
They're calling it the best anti-wrinkle treatment ever. Better than Botox and everything before it. Now clinically approved in Sydney. We'll see just how good it is. Start your day with Nat and Sherbo.
No assistance whatsoever.
Start with Sunrise tomorrow. Monday on 7 News. The new way to slash power bills. Digging deep to tap free home heating and cooling that never runs out.
It warms the house up quickly.
How Sydney is switching to the natural energy sitting under their homes. Only on 7 News with Mark Ferguson, Monday.
Tonight's 7 News headlines: a failed military coup in Russia is being seen as a win for Ukraine, Vladimir Putin's power weakened, and a paramilitary chief expelled. A Padstow Heights home has been destroyed by fire just a day after the same property was raided by tactical police. Disgraced former MP Daryl Maguire has been charged with giving false and misleading evidence at a public inquiry. And thousands of football fans have marched across the Harbour Bridge 25 days out from the Women's World Cup. Now here's Amber with Sydney's weather.
Thank you, Mark. We've got more sunshine on the way for Sydney tomorrow, but it's looking like a blustery start to the working week. Right now in the city, it is a touch below 16 degrees, though it does feel closer to 10 in a moderate northwesterly breeze. If we take a look at the satellite, and you can see a ridge of high pressure has settled over the northern half of New South Wales, with clear skies but cold and frosty mornings set to persist over the first half of the week. You can also see this front approaching. It's going to generate gusty conditions across southern and eastern parts of the state as it brushes the far southeast corner. We're also expecting a rain band to arrive sometime on Tuesday at this stage, producing widespread showers for most districts midweek. But around the capitals tomorrow, windy conditions are forecast right across the country southeast, thanks to that passing front, with that system also bringing a few showers to Adelaide, Melbourne and Hobart tomorrow. Meanwhile, in Canberra, cloudy, a possible shower, tops of 11 degrees, with a sunny but 25 degrees forecast in Brisbane. Statewide tomorrow, it should remain mostly dry, just a few showers possible across the southeast as that front tracks towards the coast. As those winds develop, damaging gusts of up to 90 kilometres per hour are forecast. They'll likely impact southern parts of Sydney, the mountains, the Illawarra and parts of the south coast and southern tablelands. But winds of up to 55 kilometres per hour are expected right across the Sydney metro area tomorrow, becoming light during the evening, with daytime temperatures generally hovering around 18 to 19 degrees in most parts. On the water tomorrow, westerlies should run at up to 25 knots early, increasing to 30 knots during the middle of the day before easing again during the late evening. So we do have multiple warnings in place, including for Sydney's enclosed waters and the coast tomorrow. Those warnings stretching from Port Macquarie down to Batemans Bay, with gale winds expected off the waters of Eden tomorrow. Back in the city though, it is looking like a sunny but windy day. Tops of 19 degrees forecast, with 18 degrees the forecast top tomorrow across the west. Now Tuesday should be partly cloudy before a shower or two arrives on Wednesday. Only light at this stage. There's a chance we'll see those light falls persist along the coastal fringe early on Thursday, but otherwise we're expecting a return to mostly fine conditions by the end of the week. So all in all, Mark, we've got a little bit of everything on the way this week.
Yes, stay out of the breeze if you can. Thanks, Amber. 7 News is about to launch into a new era from a new home. From tomorrow, our 6 p.m. bulletin will come to you from Australia's newest purpose-built studios, letting us show you more than ever before. So now it's time to look back as we sign off from 7's Martin Place studios.
From our new studio in the heart of Sydney, this is 7 News with Ian Ross.
Good evening, round one.
It was August 2004, and for the 6,873 days since.
With Ann Sanders.
With Chris Barth.
With Angela Cox and Michael Usher. With Mark Ferguson.
Good evening.
It's been the place for Sydney's 7 News, offering a window into the news in bustling Martin Place. Front and centre in changing times, hosting leaders of the land, a focus for celebrity visits.
You need to keep working.
In 2014, becoming part of the story, evacuated during the Lindt Cafe siege opposite a police sniper taking up position.
Monitoring the movements of a madman.
The place where the nation and state story has unfolded.
Labor will form government.
The future debated, the world shared.
Coalition forces, including 8 Super Hornet fighter jets from Australia.
Here at Martin Place, the control room, the studio, the newsroom, all had to be built into what was the banking chamber of the former State Bank. But now all of this is on the move to a brand new home that's purpose-built and state-of-the-art. For all 7 News, on air, online.
Good night.
A new beginning. Paul Caddock, 7 News.
And that is 7 News this Sunday, our last from here. We'll have updates for you throughout the evening, and the latest is at 9:50. I'm Mark Ferguson from all the team. I hope you have a great night.
Stream 7 News anytime, live and on demand on 7plus. And with 7news.com.au, you'll know the news now.